well, we finally have ourselves this long overdue video that I put off for literally a month and a half, if not two. I actually don't remember. But here we are. We have the Zealios V2s, Everglide Jade Green V2s, and of course Zeal V1s, the ones that started it all. And the reason why I'm making this video is because of the fact that I can't seem to find a proper tactility comparison in-camera sort of versus video involving the two versions alongside its supposed clone of the V1s, which is the Everglide Jade Green V2s. Some person claimed so on a comment thread I saw somewhere, but I actually don't know if that is true or not, because the actual supposed alternative to Zeal V1s is actually the Ergo Clears, or Ergo Clears if you want to say it alternatively. Now the problem with this review in particular is that I'm not sure if I just introduced a new form of variability, because I could not get Zeal V1s and Zeal V2s in the same weight, and I searched for months. Either one person had 62 gram but they were all lubed, or 65 gram but they were not lubed, or 78 gram and they were stock, or whatever. So what I did is that I actually took Zeal V2s that are 65 gram, I figured those are pretty popular weights, and I put those springs into the Zeal V1s. And I left the Everglide Jade Green's V2s stock because, well, they're Everglide Jade Green V2s. If the tactility is there or not, they're pretty similar in terms of weighting, so yeah, I'd say I don't need to change the weights of the springs. So the most important ones are the Zeal V2s and of course the Zeal V1s. Now, what we're going to do is the standard, in front of the camera, along with tolerance checking. So I'm going to put it inside a switch tester. I'm going to wiggle the top housing here if there's any, rattling or whatever. So I think that's it for the overview of the video. There really isn't much else to it. I just really wanted to make this comparison because it seems like I haven't found any in terms of short and concise, under 20 minutes, rather than whatever. Anyway, let's get into it. Alright, we have our condenser microphone here, so that's as raw as audio is going to get. And let's start off with Zeal V1s, and how I managed to mark them, because the stems are kind of the same color, is that I marked them with a little bit of red on the bottom, you can see over there. So I know which ones are Zeal V1s and Zeal V2s, because the tactility is actually pretty pronounced. And I actually found myself getting a little bit confused, even though that, I probably shouldn't have. Anyway, so let's try to look at the Zeal V1. Let's try to look at the Zeal V1 tactility first. So I'm going to zoom in on this. And it'd probably be better if I were to move this to the side a little bit. There we go. We can have the clear side of the stem. So again, these are stock, other than the fact that I had opened up the top housing. However, I did squeeze in the prongs on the sides to make sure that it goes in more tightly than if I were just to put it back on. So hopefully that eliminates a little bit more variability, as I'm a sucker for that. But anyway, let's take a look at the Zeal V1 tactility. Okay, so there's pre-travel here. There's a bit of a round start. Oh, and there's the bump. So here's the bump of Zeal V1s with 65 gram springs. So it's there, but there is pre-travel, tactility, and then over-travel. So the over-travel here, tactility, and then the wiggle. So I think this is like a good, I think I understand why people were complaining about Zeal V2s being too tactile, because they like the feel of Zeal V1s, but I do acknowledge that these things are they're pretty tactile actually. I can see why people like the V1s way before any of the big tactility things came around. Alright, in contrary then, let's take a look at a Zeal V2. The Zeal V2s, I didn't mark anything on the bottom. Yeah, so let's take a look at the tactility on this one. Okay, so right off the bat, there's way less pre-travel, and wow, yeah, that's a sudden drop right there. So that tactility is much bigger than the Zeal V1s, and you can see how it's pushing my finger back quite strongly, actually. and of course the over travel post bump, I suppose. But yeah, you can tell by this that half the switch is basically just tactility, if not 60 or 75%. So that's a drastic change. I can see why people may have loved this or hated it. But I suppose the big tactility thing was supposed to be a big attractive feature, because this is the time when, you know, holy pandas were coming around and they were still being sold for $6 a switch. I think I'll out of that now. Okay. Now, in contrary, I did make a review on the Jade Green V1s, or the V2s, and I can say for certain that they do not, you know, compare in tactility. I'll link a video description right here, but you can tell by the Jade V1s, there's a lot more travel up front. The bump is very tiny. It doesn't really push my finger back much. Like I said in the previous review, these are made for those that want to upgrade from Cherry MX Browns and such, and their respective clones, but they don't want to go too far into the realm of tactility where they start reaching binary levels of tactility. So, like I said, this is like an upgraded Cherry MX Brown, where the tactility is ever so slightly more pronounced, but it's still not very tactile. So color me disappointed when I actually thought these were Zeal V1 replacements. I ordered like 75 of them off of Taobao, and I tried to put them inside my keyboard. I was like, these aren't tactile at all. But I can respect these for what they are. So again, let's take a look at the tactility. We have a lot of pre-travel, small bump here, and of course the post-tactility here. They are very pretty though. I do like these. Okay, so in terms of the tactility, of course, Zeal V2s take the cake in terms of highest tactility amount. But the Zeal V1s, now that I've tried some, I actually do like them. They offer this sort of ergo clear feel, but as Glarsis said in his ergo clear review, there seems to be a weird sort of 4-stage tactility to the ergo clears that make them a lot more unique, I suppose, or at least desirable and cheap to make. But Zeal V1s don't have that, to my knowledge. I did have some ergo clears that I had made and tried out before filming this video a while ago, but I did do the comparison again just before recording, and I did remember that what I thought before also applied to what I was doing now, in which that the ergo clears have their own unique sort of extra notch of tactility somewhere around the sort of travel, if I can say, for lack of a better term. So the Zeal V1s still are similar, but they're not identical. So they are, by definition, different in tactility. Anywho, let's try the top housing wobble. And here we are with the ladder setup. We have the very, renowned acrylic switch tester that I've had for a while now. Thank you, Alessio. And, of course, the switches here. I promise I'll be using a proper chassis at some point, but they just haven't been coming. I ordered 2 keyboards, both hot swappable in terms of PCBs, but they are high-end, so to speak. One of them is a special project that I cannot reveal what it is, although some people may know. And the other is the SAKA or Saka 68 by Further. That should be coming soon. I see all that stuff in the production channel and such like that, but I digress. So, with that, let's start with a Zeal V1, if I could find one. Here we are. And I made sure that these housings were tight before I put them back on. But I still think there is a bit of play to them, but I suppose this audio test will, well, determine whether that is true or not. So I'll put it inside the exact same spot on here, and I'm just gonna wiggle the housings around and see if we can listen to any rattle. Alright, Zeal V1s. Well, I guess that doesn't need to be tested any further. There is a bit of wobble to this, and I'm pretty sure the reason why people were so adamant in filming your Zeals and JWKs or whatever is because these housings always seem to have bad top housing, which I suppose the switch films do help. Let's take a look at a stock Zeal V2. This should have less variability because this is completely stock. There's still rattle to this. Keep in mind I'm using my fingers, not my fingernail. I can tap it. And if there's sound coming in from it, then you know it's not completely tight. So it seems like the Zeal V2s are also not problem-free. Now let's listen to the Everglide Jade Green V2s. Oh yeah. If I remember right, Walker's Keyboard Science did do a Everglide review where the Jade Greens that he had were actually pretty atrocious due to the top housing rattling quite a lot. So I suppose, if I remember right, it also is the video in which that he describes switch films. Perhaps it is. But take a listen. You can hear it rattling. So all three of these switches seem to have a top housing rattle, which I'm not surprised, but at the same time I'm still disappointed. However, I suppose that does make all the sense when people start putting these on. The little switch films. That won't focus because these things are way too thin, but alright, let's move on to the lubed and film test. I'll be using Lube 3G, which is Kazoo's own specialty lube that he does sell, and of course switch films that I can't show on camera because they won't focus. So alright, away we go. Before I forget, let's do a test, a sound test as you will, with a keycap on these. So I'm gonna do Everglide Jade V2s, Jade Green V2s rather. I'm gonna do Zeal V1s and then Zeal V2s. Let's take a listen real quick. And we're back. Let's take a look at what we did today. If I can get these to focus, you can tell that all of these have been filmed with red films. These are TX 0.15 millimeters, and they have been lubed properly with Lube 3G. So let's repeat the test one more time, except I will first do the raw sound test with the keycap and without the keycap, and compare it to what it is stock. So again, Everglide Jade Green V2s, Zeal V1s, and then Zeal V2s. Let's begin. Zeal V1s. And Zeal V2s. Okay, interesting. So my conclusion about these switches is that, one, the Jade Greens are not anything like Zeal V1s, especially when you lube and film them. I kept in mind not to lube the legs. The only thing that I did was lightly apply a lube to the inside railings, the stem, and the spring. I did not lube the top housing, I did not lube any of the legs, and I also did not over lube anything. It was just dip a tiny bit and apply very, whatchamacallit, modestly, if that's the right term. It probably isn't. But the Zeal V1s do not feel anything like the Everglide Jade Green V2s. The Jade Green V2s are, yet again, like I said, further proves my point actually with this test, is that they are for those who enjoy Chair MX Brown Tactility, but like a little bit more, just a tad bit more, but not really. Zeal V1s, on the other hand, they actually feel okay. When you lube the top housing, the actual tactility is pretty clean when you have it in your hand like this. However, when you put a keycap on it, the interesting thing is, it seems like the tactility just kind of disappears. Like, if I were to slowly press it, I can appreciate it, but it actually just feels more like a hitch, or like an extra piece of weight that I need to get past, which, admittedly, now that I've tried it, I guess I can say for myself, subjectively, that I'm not a fan. I won't argue against a board that uses these. As a matter of fact, I felt pretty good ones, but I like Zeal V2s better if you lube the legs, because I do remember there was one specific keyboard that Alessio gifted his friend, where he took a lot of Zeal V2s that he didn't want, lubed it heavily with 3204, and I thought it was typing heaven, but he doesn't have it anymore. And the good thing about the Zeal V2s is that because the tactility is so high in terms of, well, any form, whether in your hand or on a switch tester or on a keyboard, their tactility is not lost. The weird thing is though, I don't know if you can hear it, but there is some sort of like weird leaf ping to this. Take a listen. I'm not sure if it's because I didn't lube the legs or whatever, but that leaf ping is kind of metallic, and it's pretty pronounced if I do say so myself. So I'm not sure if that will affect someone's purchasing decisions. Probably won't, because the OV2s are always recommended in the regular market, but of course everyone's doing the research now, which I'm very glad. U4Ts all the way. But in terms of the Zeal V2s, I can see why a lot of people love these, and you know what? I'm a fan. I like them. I think the tactility is still a little bit too much for me. I do prefer crystal purples from Everglide, which I actually am working on. You can't see it, but underneath the camera here, there's like cups of like top housings, bottom housings, and springs from the crystal purples that I'll be putting inside my Socket 68. But in terms of the Zeal V2s, yeah, you know what? I like them all. But I do like the Zeal V2s the best out of all of these. Will I use Zeal V2s? No. No. I will not be using Zeal V2s. I think they're overpriced as fuck. And I would prefer my tactilities to be ever so slightly more rounded. And so that's where the U4Ts come in alongside Everglide Crystal Purples, which is my personal favorite market switch that doesn't have to be hybridized. But in terms of everything else, I suppose that ends the review. So my concluding thoughts is Jade Greens are not Zeal V1 clones. Zeal V1s are still Zeal V1s. And Zeal V2s are overpriced, but I do like them. I don't know. I guess how do I end these things?